Ladies and gentlemen, Joel Schumacher.
Well, hi. I want to thank you all for coming out in the rain. Never have so many waited for so little for so long. And dear diary, today I drove in the rain to see an old man and got nothing out of it. I want to thank whoever put that together because it's pretty amazing. And as you can see, I owe my entire career to my casts. And I'm not a genius, I'm not the greatest director in the world, but I'll match my casts to anybody's on the planet Earth. And they just all happen to be so gorgeous. I think we started a lot of careers together on those movies, especially my own. And so I'm very grateful to all of them and for taking a chance on me. So, and the festival I should thank, and my friends Jeff Sharp and Luke Parker Bowles for asking me to do this, and then Jess Cagle, who's one of my closest friends, and on and on. So have I thanked everyone that I'm supposed to thank? Well, anyway.
We'll think of some more.
And thank you for being you.
As we go on.
Are we sitting down?
Yes, we're sitting down.
Okay.
Are you ever going to sit down? I have questions for you. You mentioned your casting a second ago, and you're famous for casting. I think that a lot of people don't. There would be no Matthew McConaughey. Well, I know that maybe that's an over. I know you hate it when I say that, but just let me say it. There would be no Colin Farrell, no Matthew McConaughey, no Rob Lowe, no Demi Moore.
Of course there would.
On and on and on. But you gave Julia Roberts. You gave a lot of them their very first big break. You have an ability to spot talent. And where do you think that comes from?
Growing up on great movies when I was a kid. I don't know. I mean, if you had met, naturally as you don't expect to have a career. You don't even expect to make a movie. You just want to. And I started as a $200 a week costume designer when I was turning 30, and lucky to finally be working in Hollywood, my dream since I was a kid growing up on the streets of New York. So there I was, and I was just too naive and too ignorant to know that the chances of me becoming a movie director were absolutely impossible. And how that all happened is way too long a story, but I don't know. I mean, if you had met all of the newcomers in some of those movies, and then many others that came later. If Julia Roberts walked in your office when she was 19 and you didn't hire her, you shouldn't be in the movie business. Because
I'm sure though there were people who didn't. What did you see? What did you see in Julia Roberts when she came in for the
only
meeting?
thing that happens when people become stars is you see something in them, and then the audience agrees. That's all that happens, because they had it already. And
what did you see in her?
Well, is there anyone like her? Okay, when you do the directors, you have to do narration of the movies for DVD and for certain things that where you try to remember anecdotes and say things. And first of all, Flatliners is Jan de Bont, the great cinematographer who went on to become a director. But what he did with Flatliners was amazing. And he clearly was madly in love with Julia. And who wasn't? But every time I cut to one of her close-ups, I just say on the narration, Julia Roberts at 20. I don't know what else to say. I mean, what can you say? And Pretty Woman and Steel Magnolias had not come out yet. It was really Arnon Milchan and Gary Marshall that had, just before we started shooting, she had just finished shooting Pretty Woman, and no one knew Pretty Woman was going to be Pretty Woman. And so I think I get credit for what they did, but no one had seen that and I hadn't seen it. So it was really, yeah, they're like forces of nature. I mean, I can tell you all those stories. I saw Demi Moore. She had very long black hair, and I don't know how young she was, but really young. And she was running down a hallway at Universal, and I literally said to my assistant at the time, follow that girl and see if she's an actress. Because I couldn't find anyone to play that part in ELMO'S FIRE. And he came back, and he said, her name's Demi Moore. She was on General Hospital, and she's really sexy, and she rides a motorcycle, but she doesn't wear a helmet. And I thought, well, that is the character, right? And then she came in and dazzled us all with her reading. And, of course, that movie launched a lot of people, including me. And then Lost Boys came right after it. But we can save Lost Boys till a little later.
We're not going to re-leak.
No.
But maybe one of the stars of Lost Boys is coming out of it.
You would have hired these people, too. And, you know, I think Matthew, in his first starring role in A Time to Kill, was just brilliant. And then I think it was hard. He was a young kid from Texas. I think it was very hard to have instant fame. He's the first unknown that Graydon Carter ever put on the cover of Vanity Fair when he saw the movie. And Bruce Weber and Ingrid Cicci put Matthew on the cover of Interview. And suddenly he was, you know, and I don't think he knew how to handle it at first, and I think he had some confusing times like we all do, but he has absolutely lived up to that promise and beyond. So, but that was always there. I mean, you can't do that final speech in that movie unless you have it, because you can't fake it.
Right. When did you fall in love with movies?
Oh, when I was a kid, I grew up before television, which I can't see any of you because there are lights in my eyes, but I don't know if anybody in this room remembers life without television. But I was lucky because even though it wasn't an advantaged neighborhood without much luxury, like everywhere in America, it had a huge movie palace. The Sunnyside Movies.
It was Long Island City, right?
Yeah. And obviously the section called Sunnyside. And it was, you know, it was one of those palaces that was like a shrine to glamour, and one that you'd never want to see with the lights on, I think. But anyway, and so where my mother and I lived, which is on the ground floor of the building, I could literally, I mean, the back doors of the theater were across the street where the empty lot where we played baseball was. So I was either getting into trouble, which was a lot, cutting school, which was a lot, and sneaking in, or I had tips because I was delivering meat for the butcher on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays sometimes. And people would give you, this will tell you the era, people would give you some pennies, a nickel, and if you got a quarter, even though you were very young, you could buy a pack of cigarettes. So, but it was the golden era of Hollywood. So I was, without realizing it as a kid, watching the great American directors and, you know, the incredible movie stars and the incredible movies that Hollywood made. And my mother worked in a dress store selling dresses. And there was a little tiny theater next to the bookstore. And I went in there because I would just see movies over and over and over again. And I went in there, and there were these movies with subtitles, which was the Italian neorealism and the French Nouvelle Vague. So, I mean, this was Fellini and De Sica and and well, no, Antonioni came later, but there were these amazing movies with these amazing actors and actresses. And I really, in defense of my gorgeous cast, I really grew up on movies with some of the most beautiful human beings in the world, and they really knew how to light them.
Who were your favorite stars and a couple of favorite films?
Well, Marlon Brando, of course.
Yeah.
And, oh, there's a lot. Spencer Tracy. And then, although he wasn't the greatest actor that ever lived, I do remember being really a kid and seeing Cary Grant walk on the screen in black tie in some nightclub with a New York outside glittering, a black and white movie, and all these beautiful women in evening gowns, and I thought this was real. I mean, I thought this was real, but the minute I saw him, I said, oh, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy. And in the Bronx, there was a young kid my age, we're the same age, called Ralph Lauren. And he saw Cary Grant and said, I want to be that guy. So, and that built the incredible international empire of Ralph Lauren. And so, I'm going on too long.
No, you had a career as a fashion designer.
I saw some of the greatest movies from Europe, from Japan, from Hollywood, and I was smitten. And by the age of 7, I saw a movie I shouldn't have seen at my age called Great Expectations. I would always sneak into the adult ones, and you're hoping to find an adult. I'd crawl on the floor in the dark. I hated children's movies. I had anything to do with childhood. I wanted to be a teenager since I was like 5. And I knew there was something happening, and it wasn't happening for kids. And so, and I was fascinated by noir and, some of the darkest movies. And I went to see Great Expectations. And because my father died when I was 4, it begins with Pip in a graveyard. This little kid who's I can't remember now, if both parents are dead or just, I think both. But, and I guess it was the first moving image I saw where I was a little boy who was in a graveyard. And I think it fascinated me. And of course it was about someone with great expectations. And I couldn't sleep for 3 weeks when I saw that film. I didn't know there was a David Lean. I didn't know there was a Charles Dickens. I didn't know that it was the most famous books of all time, written, directed by one of the most famous directors that ever lived. I just knew that I wanted to tell stories after that.
So you had a whole career as a fashion designer before a movie director.
Reluctantly. I wanted, as I say, I wanted to work in movies since I was 7. My mother worked 6 days a week and 3 nights a week just to keep us in a little apartment and have food and, I'm not going to get into that part. But my dream ever since I was a kid, like a lot of people, is to make a better life for their mother. And so, because I did windows and interiors at Bentley's department store, while I was going to Parsons, I knew everyone in the fashion world, because everybody in the fashion world went there, and everybody said, you should work in fashion, Joel, because you'll make a lot of money. And those were the key words. And then the minute I graduated from school and Mort Janko made this incredible deal for me to design, just as I signed the deal, my mother died suddenly. And so then, I didn't want to design clothes. I wanted to make movies. And there was no real movie colony in New York, so, and then that goes on way too long, that's true. But anyway, by the time I was 30, and you may or may not know Dominic Dunn or of his work. Dominic was a producer at that time. His sister, as you may know, is Joan Didion. Her husband was Dominic's brother, John Gregory Dunn. And I just stalked Dominic Dunn when I met him, because he was going to make a movie in L.A. from Joan's great book, Plays at Lays. And Frank Perry was the director. And I just stalked them so I could be a gopher. And then finally they said, we don't need gophers in L.A. There'll be tons of them. We need a really cheap costume designer for $200 a week. Okay, this is 1971. And do you think you could do costumes for a movie? And I said, absolutely, not knowing anything that entails. And then they said, okay, we'll fly you out to Hollywood for a 2-week trial. So against all of my friends' warnings, advice, people thought I was crazy, and I guess I was, but I just got on a plane, and I just knew something was going to happen. But I never knew that what happened was going to happen. But anyway, that's another story. So I'm very lucky. I'm lucky to be alive. We're not going to get into the 60s and 70s at all.
I just want to, as we go through the narrative here, before we bring on our next guest, there were a lot of movies that you did costumes on. There was several Woody Allen films.
2.
Sleeper and Interiors.
Woody Allen changed my life. When we were doing Sleeper,
you'd made that big suit that he bounced around in.
Yeah, and it's in that tribute to the golden age of film. In the middle of it, there's Woody it's called the Hydrovac suit. Right, and it was, if you've ever seen it, it's a wacky, futuristic comedy. We shot in the Rocky Mountains, which is very unusual for Woody, because in those days, everything was in a 5-block radius involving his apartment and Elaine's restaurant, and that was it. That was that. And so, we got to be very close friends, which we are to this date, and he said, I think you will be a director, but you have to write. And I said, but I'm not a writer. And he said, oh, you're sort of funny, you're sort of intelligent, just write. And I've said this to so many people who are aspiring screenwriters, film schools, colleges, universities, young kids in the inner city that want to write movies and do things, is that he said, but you must finish what you write and you must have other people read it, because if you don't, it does not exist. And that is true, because a lot of people, you can rewrite a script or a novel for the rest of your life if you want to. And that doesn't mean it exists at all. It doesn't exist. I mean, we make movies for the audience, which is astounding to the critics. Before we bring out our next guest, I wanted to ask you how you came about the movie Lost Boys. When did you get the idea? When did this land in your lap? And after the success of St. Elmo's Fire, which I wrote and directed, which was an unexpected success and cost very little money, it just hit the zeitgeist. There's also luck. I mean, you all know there's luck and magic in life, wherever it's come. Love might be an example, but I've had a lot of luck. And then for every 1,000 no's, people say yes. I can't say I've had so many no's, though. I mean, I think I hustled a lot of people into believing in me. And so I was offered, when you have success, in Hollywood, especially when you're starting out, you get put in a compartment. So after St. Elmo's Fire, I got all the yuppie schmerz movies, because Less Than Zero, the book had just come out. There was a book called Social Disease. There was another one, and they were all kind of about young people trying to find themselves when they're not adults yet, in a sense, and being expected to be adults with the responsibilities. Well, I had just made that movie, and I didn't want to go there again. And then Mark Canton was the president of Warner Brothers, and we went for lunch, and we're having Bloody Marys, and Mark said, there's a movie I would like you to do. And he said Dick Donner, who's a friend of mine, then he said Dick Donner was going to direct it, but he is going to do Lethal Weapon. No fool, Dick. And he said, Dick and I want you to do The Lost Boys. And I said, what is that? And he started to explain it. And I said, wait a minute. This is the head of a studio offering me a movie. I've only done 3 movies. I said, wait, is this some little kid's vampire movie? And Mark was great. For a very excitable person, I could see him control his rage, right? And then he said very softly, would you give me the respect to at least read it? And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And, I felt awful because I was such a dickwad. And 3 years earlier, if someone offered me a movie, I would have I don't know. I'm not going to say anything vulgar, but I would have done a lot of things. and so here I am going to the head of Warner Brothers. Oh, this is surely beneath me to do this movie. And indeed it was when I read it, because it was little kids. It was like Goonies Go Vampire. And it was all little kids. They were Cub Scout jokes. There were peanut butter jokes. There was absolutely no oomph to it, no zhuzh. And I called Mark and my agent and Dick Donner, and it was lunchtime. But I literally read it like this: oh please, I can't believe this thing. This is the dumbest thing. And and so I ran for many decades. And so I went out for a run after it was lunchtime, and so I left word for all of them and went out for a run. And I was so pissed off because Dick had just done Goonies, and I visited the set many times, and he had built these plastic caves. And there was a cave in it where the vampires lived. And so I said, oh, and Dick's going to use that goddamn cave again, which was really cute in Goonies, but it's and I thought, wait a minute, if this is in Santa Cruz, California, why couldn't there have been like a Death in Venice Baroque hotel that was built at the turn of the last century, and maybe when the great earthquake came, which was 1906 or 1907, I don't know. Kiefer explains this, that why couldn't the whole hotel have fallen into the crack? And then why couldn't have all this Baroque things, which would be great? And why can't there be teenagers? And why can't they look like a British rock band? And why can't there be rock and roll? And why don't they ride motorcycles? And there's no girl. Like, we need a hot, gorgeous girl. And so by the time they called back, I said, I think I have an idea. And I went into Mark's office, and as I was doing it for him, he said, just do it, just go and do it. And so that was Lost Boys. And then the great Jeff Bohm, who died way too young, who wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, he rewrote it with me. And then, he did the writing. And but we thought of a lot of the ideas. And then I have to say, a lot of what's great in Lost Boys is the cast who improvised and did things that were amazing.
And speaking of the cast.
Yes, is it time?
I'd like to bring out Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes!
Thanks for having me.
I
read that script he's talking about. I read both.
Yes. Should I tell them? I think I'll tell them how we met. Okay. I was watching a fine film that Jamie Foley did in the mid-'80s with Sean Penn and Chris Walken called At Close Range. And Kiefer had a part in that movie, but the part was cut out, which happens. It happens with the best of scenes and the best of actors. It's just the movie's too long. It doesn't. I don't even know the part you were supposed to play. But there's one shot outside a courthouse at the end where they cut to, some people in the crowd. And it's relatively close on about 4 people and Kiefer. And I remember I sat up in my chair in the movie theater and said, "Who's that kid?" And then Marianne Doherty, who was casting it at Warner Brothers, Lost Boys, she said, she did her homework and she said, "Oh, that's Kiefer Sutherland." And I said, "Well, see if he wants to come in." Because I couldn't find anyone to play the part of the head of the vampires. And it was a very important part. And so Kiefer came in, and I think we probably had one of the shortest talks in the world. And you didn't even audition. No. That's what I mean. It is like falling in love. It's like, it's out there, and you don't know what it is, and then you sort of know exactly what you were looking for, and it's beyond what you were looking for because you didn't know you were looking for that. And so then, what's very interesting about Lost Boys is Kiefer has the least dialogue of anyone in the movie, and you can't take your eyes off him. And he's just born that way. And I have to say, the great Michael Chapman lit you phenomenally, too.
Yes, he did.
And what's really interesting, and then I'll let you talk, but what's really interesting, too, is have you seen the great big vampire book? It's the book of all vampires since Vlad the Impaler, down to, whatever is current. And there's only one photo on the cover, and it's you.
Ah.
It's you as David, I think your name is.
Yes, David was the character.
Okay, so from your point of view, lead on.
Meanwhile, Kiefer's thinking, I didn't get permission for that. Who published this vampire book?
No, it was an amazing time. I was so young. I was about 17 when we started. When we first met, I was 18 when we shot the film.
Right.
I remember Joel wanted me to grow my hair long, and so I had grown my hair long, and then he wanted me to dye it white. And I dyed it white, and when it was really long and dyed white, I looked like a failed wrestler, and it panicked the life out of me. But I had to follow the rule. He said he wanted my hair long, so he said, "Well, go get ready, and we're going to do a screen test." And we had started shooting. I had just gotten there. It was my first day. And V. Neal, who was just really one of the most incredible makeup artists in our industry.
And won about 4 Academy Awards since.
Yeah. And I said, Joel wants me to have my hair long, so I'm going to keep it long in the back. But I really like kind of the look of Billy Idol and stuff like that, so I'd like to get it cut quite short up top. And I'll never forget and I had to walk down the stairs to the beach where Joel was shooting after I had done that. And there's no going back after you've done that. And he saw me coming, and he went, "What the? You cut your hair?" And I went, "No, I left it long in the back. I just had a few strands." And so I think we both conspired to develop the mullet, which was unfortunate.
You did invent the mullet.
Yeah.
No,
in Lost Boys.
It was perfect. Everything was perfect, and you were perfect. But the reason I still tell everybody not to cut their hair before a movie, because I want to make sure the hair looks a certain way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everybody starts complaining, my hair's too long, my hair's too long.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I like to go in and work with hair. And so they but if that was your idea, it was fucking fabulous.
Well, bless your heart. It was the scariest descent down to the beach I've ever had.
Oh, I think you got over it. I think the next night you were doing wheelies on the boardwalk.
And broke my arm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I didn't make it easy on you. I just have to say one thing.
Yes, you did.
And it's.
You've always been a dream. We've done about 5 or 6.
We've done
movies.
5 films together, and the
all number ones.
Yeah.
The weekends they open except for one, but
I
doesn't
was
mean
Joel's
it was a
lucky charm. But I have to say one thing, you know, and it really does encapsulate working, for me, from my perspective, working for Joel. We were shooting Flatliners. It was the second film that we had done together. And we had done some shooting in Chicago, but the real filming started in California. And it was my first day back in Los Angeles. And for those of you, there was a wonderful movie about Harvard Law School called Paper Chase. And when I first read Flatliners, I likened Flatliners to Paper Chase. I thought it was going to be kind of, we could do this far out kind of idea of this medical experiment as long as it was grounded in some kind of real reality. And so that had just been how I had developed the story in my mind. And I should have known a lot better. And there was a scene where I run through the medical building to the lab where we finally do the experiments. And I'm running through the first foyer, and I pass a miniature head of the Statue of Liberty. And I'm running, and I'm, what the fuck is that? And then I round the corner. And then I round the corner, and there's a huge box with like 50 rubber gloves sticking out of it. And that throws me as well. And then finally I get to the lab, and there's a gurney over a grate with wind coming up, the most unhygienic smoke you know, place you could ever see. And I come unglued, and that doesn't happen to me a lot. And I literally looked at Joel and I said, I can't do this. And I walked off the stage. And I fully expected Joel to be really furious with me and fire me. But I didn't know how to do this. And he walked over to me really calmly. And this was taking time from shooting. And he just said, you know, I need you to understand that if you don't realize that every morning I wake up, I realize your future is in my hands, that your career is in my hands, that if you don't understand that I take that responsibility to the marrow of my bones, you're crazy. But if you do believe that, if you do understand that I know the pressure you're under and that this can make your career or it can end it, if you believe that I wake up every morning worried about that, I beg you, please trust me. And I did. And I finished the film. I never said another word. And Joel, it's the only film that I've actually sat through and watched in a very long time. And I remember calling Joel after the screening. And it was one of, and still is, one of my favorite films that I've ever done, because it was one of the first times I completely surrendered and to what someone else was doing. And he had earned that trust. It was not an easy thing for me to do. But I had not been kind of, I don't think I've ever had another relationship with a director who kind of handled me with that kind of care. And so for that, I will thank you forever.
I was right, wasn't I?
Yes, you were right.
Well, because it's about 5 medical students who all look like they should be on the cover of Vogue. I mean, it was a Bruce Weber photo, and they were these brilliant medical students, and they experiment with death to see what's on the other side. This was a big mistake, and but it's literally Jan de Bont. That's why I asked Jan to film it, because when our first meeting. So this is the most uncinematic movie that it was in little tiny white rooms at Harvard Medical Center. And it was Peter's first script, and I think he had gone there or something. And so one of the most uncinematic things, and we had to do it 5 times in the movie, was an actor lying on a table, or actress, with 4 other people standing over them, because there aren't that many angles. And also, it's a scary movie. It's also about amends and redemption and many other subjects, but we had to make it an entertainment. And how to do this, so A, shoot all the experiments like it's an action movie, which we did, and then I had to make it another world so the audience could take the trip with us. And I know there was this great kid who was staying at some hotel where I was doing a press junket for it, and he said, Mr. Schumacher, did you shoot Flatliners in Rome? No, Chicago. But it's very, look, you take chances, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But it was a superb cast. Superb. And Kiefer did his part in a very difficult role, extremely difficult.
Joel had such a vision, and always has in everything that we've done together, has had such a visual vision of what he wanted to accomplish with the film. And I remember Kevin Bacon and I on Flatliners are standing underneath the elevated train, and Joel had built so many different fires in the shot that Kevin Bacon looked at me and said, secretly, this film's about the Great Chicago Fire. And that's when I knew he was going to be fine.
Actually, the first shot we did was late in the day outside Kevin's building that he lived in. And Kevin Bacon plays a medical student that was thrown out of school for taking someone's, helping a woman who was dying live. And of course, he's not allowed to do that as a medical student, so they threw him out of the school. And he and Kevin and Julia play the smartest people at the medical school. And so Kiefer has this idea of going into death to find out what's beyond there. And his ego is involved too, and a lot. But he goes to enlist Kevin, and now Kevin's character was very bold and reckless and kind of, sports and hiking, and he was one of those guys. And so he lived in a tenement in a black neighborhood. And so the first scene actually was, I painted Dante on the side of the tenement building, and he repelled out of the top story window out of Dante's eye. Which there was a staircase in the building. But my justification was he's not going to pay skipping out on the rent. And so he repelled out of the building to Kiefer, who's below, right? And they have a very intense conversation. And the way Jan de Bont shot it, he used gold reflectors, so it has that incredible light that happens in the fall, where the sun is low and it gets in your eyes, and it's all golden. I mean, it's an incredible shot. And both of them in intense close-ups at certain points, and they could not look at each other. They had to look at a screw and a bolt in the camera box. Meanwhile, they're this close to each other. But when we did the close-ups, in order to get it right, and the light in their eyes, they couldn't look at each other. And so you or Kevin then you got nervous then, the two of you, and took me aside and said, this is the only time in my life I've had to do a very important scene in a movie with a lug nut. And actually, when those dailies, they were the first ones that went to the studio, okay, they said the film is damaged. And I said, what do you mean the film is damaged? We got no report from the lab. And they said, well, there's this flickering golden light that happens across both their close-up, all their shots. And I said, that's art, and hung up the phone. No, I mean, it was, I think with that script, don't you think we had to go out there where there was...
Well, instinctually, I went the other way, but you were absolutely right.
But all the acting was absolutely true to the integrity of your talents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I learned a very valuable lesson that you were absolutely right. That if you created kind of a non-realistic world, it allowed this very crazy idea to an audience could assimilate with it. I don't think it would have worked in the way that I had imagined it, kind of in the bland little white rooms. So, yeah.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to get to another aspect of Joel's career, which has to do with his incredible generosity, his philanthropy, and that is a lot of work that he has actually done with MTV, doing public service announcements that are honestly, there are probably a lot of things that people in this room haven't seen. We're going to show you some, and some of the most impactful public service announcements and pro-social work by any Hollywood filmmaker that has ever been done.
For MTV and MTVU, which goes to colleges and universities only, but now Stephen told me last night it's available.
Yeah, it's all available.
The mental health campaign was really, really powerful.
They've had a tremendous impact. And I'm going to bring out Stephen Friedman, the
Yes.
president of MTV.
All because of him. So thrilled that you did this.
Steve, will you set up the
Well, let me just set
that we're
up
about
Steve.
to see?
Steve was a born genius, okay? And I met Steve through Jess a long time ago, in the early 90s.
Yep.
And Stephen had left a very successful firm and was at MTV and was doing specifically the social issues. That was his department that he was the head of. And so he asked me if I'd ever want to be involved. He knew I was very involved in child and teenager education. But of course I said yes immediately. Whatever it was, I was happy. And then we had a great dinner with Tom Preston and Judy McGrath and Christina Norman, right? And that was a great evening. And there was no, where's the bad part, as Woody Allen would say? Where's the bad part? There was no bad part, and they were incredibly impactful, and I don't know if we expected that, I doubt it.
Well, what was amazing is we did meet, we bonded over Lost Boys, probably the best soundtrack of a movie, maybe top 10 ever. And Joel, as he always does, those that know him, says, how can I help? And of course, I got this new job. Judy McGrath said, how do we use MTV's superpowers for good? If you know Judy, she actually talks that way. And that
means it.
And means it. And when I brought Joel in to see the staff, and if you've hung out at MTV staff, you realize it's a lot of young people, average age around 25. Joel looks around and said, oh my God, I just walked onto the set of Logan's Run. And
That's
yet,
where they kill old people. You're not young and beautiful, they
exactly,
kill you.
after the age of 30. But what you understand about Joel is he is forever young. And I think whether it's Peter Pan or Cartman from South Park.
It's Cartman,
it's
with genitals though.
Right. Joel's sense of youthful wonder enables him to get out these unbelievably vulnerable stories that touch the world. And I think as you shared that great anecdote, Joel was able to talk to Francis Bach, a young Sudanese lost boy who had been enslaved, and share his experience, or Mary J. Blige for a mental health campaign, and figure out a way to get her to share, which she had not done before, a near suicide, and turn it around so it became an inspiration.
These were all concepts developed at MTV. This represents a village of people that do this. I mean, it's definitely not me alone. And the first one I did was Fight for Your Rights, Take a Stand Against Violence. And that was Lucia Lopez, who had been rehabilitated from a generational gang in Chicago by her drama teacher in high school, and she had written a play, and that was a monologue about something she had lived through, her brother's best friend Roberto being killed in front of them. It's long, it's about 2.5 minutes, and so MTV ran it like a music video. It just said, Lucia Lopez, director Joel Schumacher. Of course, there was no music to it, and she told that story, and they got 100,000 hits while it was on. So we realized, or I certainly realized at that moment, that the power it had, and also the power that a real person. We did a lot of the HIV testing ones. We did a lot of, like, the beautiful young girl who let an older man talk her into having unsafe sex when he knew he was HIV positive. And there was something about the celebrities were brilliant, and they really talked about, I mean, real mental breakdowns. And that, you know, in senior year of high school, and definitely first year of college, there's so much depression, feeling lost, and suicidal tendencies, and suicides, as you know. So they were really bold and came out and told horrific stories about growing up or what happened to them or just their mental disease. And that was very powerful because we were hoping to have people feel they're not alone. But it's part of a team, and one of the reasons this is so great is Sophia Crenshaw. Are you here?
And Amy Campbell.
Oh, Amy's here. Oh, wow. Okay, stand up, girls. Come on, represent. Take a bow. What? Okay. And it all goes back to you. So anyway, it was a privilege. Let's do more. What can we do next?
It is a part. It is this part of your career that very few people know about, and they've had a tremendous impact. I think everybody, whatever age you are in this room, whether you're an actor, whether you're just a moviegoer, whether you just watched House of Cards on television last season, Joel has had the first season. Joel has had a tremendous impact and brought us all kinds of joy. He has personally brought me great friendship and mentorship over the years. Sometimes you're like my dad, sometimes my brother, sometimes my child.
I think you're more like
sometimes my child.
I definitely think.
Mostly my child.
All three people here
Mostly
are
my
far
child.
more mature than I am, and were when they were teenagers, okay?
I am going to bring out Jeff Sharp.
Oh, great.
Another Joel friend, and we wouldn't have a Hamptons Film Festival if it were not for Jeff Sharp, who is really here
Thank
for
you,
the
Jeff.
main event.
Hi, Jeff. Hey, Joel. How are you, hon? Good.
Well, you can imagine once we convinced Joel, which was not easy. Joel, you hate this stuff.
I hate it, and my socks are falling down.
Luke Parker Bowles and I took Joel out to lunch one day, and
It was for coffee.
it was for coffee, and we presented the idea of celebrating.
No time for this.
We presented this idea of celebrating his career with his lifetime in directing award, and Joel was very patient and sat through with it, and thank goodness that's why we're all here today. But you can imagine once the word got out, how many friends and colleagues and adoring fans wanted to come out and celebrate Joel. So I want to mention a few of those friends that made today possible. And first, I just wanted to draw your attention just for a moment to the.
Talking about money now?
Not yet. To the program that we handed out on your way in, and I just wanted to remember a dear friend of ours who sadly can't be here with us today, but he's certainly here with us in spirit. Eli Riesborg would have loved to be here with us today, and he contributed this beautiful sketch of Joel, which is on the program that you have with us today. So we remember Eli. We want to share our thanks. We want to share our thanks with Jess. Thank you so much for coming in, making this happen, sponsoring our event. Stephen, Amy, Sophia, thank you so much. This MTV clip reel was a huge undertaking. Keith.
Pick the movie.
Joel,
Oh,
good
you picked
job.
it.
Is that what you're looking for? You did a fantastic job, Joel. That was amazing music.
I swear to God, I thought whoever picked that music is a fucking genius. There you go. I would have bet on Sophia.
Kiefer Sutherland, thank you so much for coming out. Kiefer, you were the logical first person to reach out to because you and Joel have worked together 5 times, and it was the fastest response in the world. You got back to me in like 2 minutes, and you're like, yes, I'm in. So thank you for being here. It's awesome. Thank you to the Peterson family. Thank you, Aaron Cooley. I mean, we couldn't have done any of this without you. Thanks to Chai Danguri, who edited the first trailer that we celebrated your career with. Luke Parker Bowles, and the Hamptons Film Festival. Quite honestly, you know, the Hamptons has been a big part of my life, of your life, Joel, the community here, the artistic community. Our friendship started here with a walk on a beach about 22 years ago, I think. So this festival means the world to me.
It was 1986, because I was still drinking and partying then. I didn't get sober.
We weren't doing it together.
I didn't get sober till 1991.
86, were we?
It was after Lost Ark.
That's right, my favorite movie.
It was 87 or 88.
So anyway, the Hamptons Film Festival, Ann Chasson, David Nugent, the team here, thank you for allowing us to celebrate Joel today. Such a privilege and an honor. Joel, there's more. Your colleagues and your dear friends at CAA, Creative Artists Agency, wanted to commemorate today with a letter which is very personal. But I will end it with, I'll save the personal bit for you later, but by your work and your example, you spark us to feel, to think, and to live on the highest plane, imparting it all with that Cheshire cat smile of yours and your deep soul. Today we celebrate your films and your work as a gifted artist, but most importantly, and with much love, each day we celebrate you, Joel, as a mentor and a truly generous friend. With much affection, Brian Lord, Kevin Huvane, Richard Lovett, John Levin, Scott Greenberg, Jay Baker, and all your CAA family. And now it is my great privilege and honor to present my dear friend, my mentor, and my guiding light, Joel Schumacher, with the Hamptons International Film Festival Golden Starfish Award for Lifetime Achievement in Directing. Thank you, Joel.
Oh, wow.
Between the bottom two.
You want to hold the other half?
Perfect.
There we go. Okay,
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, Jess, you want to take us?
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Joel, for this.
Coming out in the rain again.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we're getting out? We're getting out.